Today in this class we'll be dealing with a new chapter, a new unit under Contract 2, that is Indian Partnership Act 1932. Now before proceeding to Indian Partnership Act, let us know how this Indian Contract Act came into force. Was it there before 1932? Or was this Partnership Act included in Indian Contract Act itself? So why is this given this particular unit, that is Partnership Act coming, why should we study with the contracts? So there may be many questions which may come up in your mind. For that, let's try to get some answer by going into the history of this. Basically, this Partnership Act came into force on 1st October 1932. So, what was this act called previously? Previously, it was there from section 239 to 266 of Indian Contract Act 1872, and it was repealed. Soon after the agency, whatever we dealt with the sections of agency, after agency, it was the Partnership Act was there. Later on it was repealed and this came into force as Indian Partnership. So there was a separate act which came into force, that is Indian Partnership Act, that came into force on 1st October 1932. So in contracts only there were sections that was related to partnership. Now coming to this partnership, how is this partnership and Indian contract related? So you got to know the history that this partnership provisions related to partnership was there in Indian contract only. They made a separate act for this. Now can you please tell me how is this partnership and contract related? So if you know this, so you will be able to understand it in a better way. Whatever you find it in Indian Contract Act, what are the essentials? We have studied the essentials, right? That there should be a consideration, there should be a lawful object, the person should be competent to contract. We have studied many essentials. Even the same essentials, when you are entering into the Partnership Act, there also those essentials are needed. Even in Partnership Act, you are entering an agreement. Agreement is one of the essentials of Partnership Act. Without an agreement, there cannot be any Partnership Act. Here we use the term agreement, that is nothing but contract. So, in order to have a valid partnership, there should be a agreement. And for that agreement or contract, there should be the essentials. That is, there should be a valid essentials which are required under contracts. So thereby you're taking some of the provisions of Indian Contract Act and you're also applying it to the Partnership Act. They are very much related to each other. And also there are provisions where you have seen about partners, speaking about partners in the Indian Contract Act, which tells us how the partner becomes liable. So all these provisions are actually related to each other, and thus we are going to study Indian Contract Act as well as Partnership Act together. They are almost same. Now by knowing all these things, brief introduction about the Partnership Act, now let's proceed further. So before going to the essentials, before knowing what are the different kinds of partnership, who are the different types of partners, how is this registration of partnership done, how is the dissolution of the firm happens, what is a firm, how is it called a firm, so how many numbers are required, who are the parties, all those, before we get into all those things, let us first know what is the definition as per section 4 of Indian Partnership Act. Yes, section 4 gives you the definition of Indian Partnership Act. What is it? The definition says that partnership is the relation between persons. So it is the relation between persons who have agreed to share profits of business carried on by all or any of them acting acting for all. Now let's try to break this definition and let's try to understand. It initially says that partnership is a relation. It is a relation between the persons. There is one relation between the persons who have agreed. That means there is an agreement for that. These persons have agreed to enter into certain relation. What is it? Still, that's all. That is enough for your partnership? No, there is further something else. To share profits of business. They have agreed to share the profits of business carried on by all. It can be carried on by all or any one of them acting for all. So it says that the last point says that business can be done by one person only on behalf of others acting for all, or it can be done by the number of persons who are there in that particular agreement who have agreed. All of them can do the business, or one person who is acting on behalf of all. So from this you can get to know that you can just analyze, you can get the essentials from this definition itself. It says that partnership is a relation. So point number 1, there should be relation between the persons. Clear? The second one is there should be agreement. They have agreed. That is why there should be agreement. And to share the profits of business. Before the profit arises, there should be some business, right? And that business should be a common business. It is not that if there are 3 to 4 persons who are doing the business here, they have agreed and they want to do business. It is not that person A is doing one business, person B is doing another business, which both of them do not have any connection at all. No, it is not like that. They should have one common business. And they are agreed to share the profits arising out of that business. Profits also and losses also. Clear? Then it may be carried on by all or anyone for acting for all. So it can be carried on by all the persons who are there in the business, or it can be only one person who is acting on behalf of the other person have authorized. Now when I say other persons have authorized, the agency relationship, you can connect it to agency relationship, right? We'll be discussing anyhow further. Now let's just consider this definition, that's all. So partnership is the relation between the persons who have agreed to share the profit of a business, who's acting on behalf, business carried on by all or any of them acting for all. So this is the basic definition of partnership. And this itself gives you what are the essentials of partnership also. The essentials are very simple, whatever I have just told. There should be relation between the person, there should be an agreement, there should be a common business, they have to agree to share the profits. Here profit I also mean losses also. And who's acting by all or acting behalf of others. That is, there should be a mutual relation between the partners. Clear with this? So first, whenever you get a questions regarding partnership, give a brief introduction about it, then give how partnership and Indian contract are related. Nothing much, it's just there are some provisions in Indian Contract Act which is also applicable for Partnership Act. And this Partnership Act was earlier there in the Indian Contract Act itself, then it was repealed and made into a separate act. Then give the definition of partnership. Partnership are under section 4 of Indian Contract Act, and just give the definition and also explain the essentials of it as I try to break it and give the explanation. Clear with that? So from the definition under section 4, we got to know what is partnership. Under that only, when you analyze the definition, when you try to break the definition and analyze that, you will also find the essentials of partnership. Now, what are the essentials of partnership? As I said in the definition itself, there should be an agreement. So basically, it needs an agreement. Second one is, there should be carrying on of business. The business should be carried on. If there is no business, then no point in having partnership. The next first is the profit sharing. So as I told you, it is not only the sharing of profits but also losses. The partners become liable for that also, to up to the whatever they've invested also in this. Again, you will be having many things to learn from this profit sharing. So profit, they have mainly entered here for the purpose of profit sharing. That is one of the essential of partnership. Then the fourth one, last one, is mutual agency. What is mutual agency? What did I say by the definition? What is partnership? Partnership is entered by one person and he is it is entered by a person. It's a relationship between a person. I'm sorry. It is a relationship between a person who they have entered for some business. So there, one person is acting on behalf of others, or else all the partners are acting, they are carrying on the business. So that means there is mutual agency. Why have I used the word agency? Because if any one person is authorized, he is being given the powers by other partners to act on behalf of them, then how does he become? Yes, they have given the powers, they have given the authority. He is like an agent who has been authorized, who has been delegated powers. So there is mutual agency. So one person is giving the to the other person the power or authority to deal in the transaction. That's why it is called mutual agency. I think now you are clear with the essentials. Now we'll go in detail what are this one by one. About the essentials of partnership, the first one I told you is there should be an agreement. Agreement is must. So this particular partnership arises from an agreement between two or more persons. Before we proceed further, let's know, is there any limit for this number of persons who can become the partners? In the earlier, you find this in Companies Act 1956 under section 11, which stated that there is a limit for the number of partnership in a firm, and that is 10 for banking and 20 for others, non-banking. So number of persons who can be the partners were given clearly. The limit was given clearly, that is 10 in case of banking and 20 in case of other business. But the new Companies Act now says that there is no as such, they've given a limit up to 50. It has not classified as banking or other business or non-banking. It is said that as per the new act, the limit is 50, and if it exceeds limit, it is said to be an illegal association. And also, one more point after this to be cleared is, when all this whatever the essentials I told you, the 4 essentials, that there must be an agreement, there must be some business which has to be carried out, there should be sharing of profits, and there should be mutual agency. When all these essentials are together, when it is present, then it is called as partnership. It is known as partnership, and persons who have entered these partnerships are called partners, and collectively, all the partners collectively, they are called firm. So it is always partnership firm. You call it as partnership firm. And the name which is given to their business that is carried on by this partners is called as firm's name. If they are going to give anything, it is firm's name. So for partnership, it is always firm's name. Now let's get back to this point again. There should be an agreement. So partnership arises from an agreement between 2 or more persons. There should be 2 or more persons. 2 is the minimum limit. There should be 2 at least. So 2 or more persons, when they enter into an agreement, there exists partnership. Now the agreement, after agreement only it becomes contract. So contract is valid. You may question that. Here in this Partnership Act, the agreement means contract only. Clear with this? So here this particular agreement should have fulfilled all the essentials of contract. that there should be consideration, there should be person who are competent to enter the contract, and there should be a lawful object. There are many essentials which you find under Contract Act, right? Even those essentials have to be fulfilled, and also what are the conditions that are given under definition section 4 of the Partnership Act should also be present. When that the Partnership Act elements plus the contract, whatever the conditions they are given, if both are there, then it is a valid Partnership Act. We'll move on further. So agreement means contract. So here you got to know it is a contract. If we say that there is an agreement between the partners, the first thing that should come into your mind is it is a contract, and this contract can be either express or implied. So I've told you, I've been telling you what is express. Express means if it is given in written, word spoken. Implied means by the act of the parties. You get to know that yes, it is implied. We'll move on to the next part. Persons capable of becoming partners. Now, what we are discussing, since there should be an agreement, there should be persons who are capable of becoming in partners, right? So, who are they? So, the first one is competent to the contract. So, when we are talking about the competent to the contract, the very first thing comes to our mind is, whenever you are talking about competence, it is minor and unsound mind, right? So here we'll be talking about the minor. The minor has got a very special place here when you compare it to other contracts. So here minor, yes, he can be a partner of the firm. Yes. So how does he become the partner? Can he not be prevented from becoming a partner? No. Nowhere when you go to the sections of Partnership Act, nowhere it says that minor cannot be prevented from becoming a partner. He can also become the partner, and he can accept the benefits which comes from this particular Partnership Act. They are going to do some business transaction, and obviously there would be some benefits, and for that benefits, even if a minor is a partner, he also becomes entitled for that. So even he can be admitted for the partnership. So a minor has a right to such a share of property and profits that is agreed upon. So whatever at the time of the agreement, when my minor is entering, if there is any agreement stating that yes, you will be entitled to get so much benefits and so much profits, then the minor shall get it. He will be getting all those profits. The next point under this minor, again you can see, is he can get the benefits. He can take home the benefits and the profit, but minor is not personally liable for any acts of the firm. In case if the firm is doing any wrongful acts, then nobody can sue the minor. If the the partnership firm is incurring any losses and is liable to pay to others, third parties, then minor is not liable. So minor is always getting a benefit from the partnership firm, and he is also entitled for the profit but not the losses. Clear with this? From this we'll move on to the next point. HUF as partner. Can the Hindu undivided family, which is an association of persons, become partner? What it says, as per the Act, the HUF cannot become a partner of a partnership firm. Your section 4 of Partnership Act says that it speaks. What it says initially, person who enter into the agreement, that agreement is partnership agreement. So persons who enter into the partnership with one another. So here there are individuals who are entering into the contract, and not the association of persons or HUF who is entering into the contract, who are entering into this particular partnership contract. So it is only the individuals who can enter, and not the body of person who can become the partner. And also, one more thing you can notice, the firm has been described as, the partnership firm is described as a Compendious way of describing the individuals constituting the firm. Compendious way of describing the individuals constituting a firm. Compendious way means like short. Compendious meaning short. COMPENDIOS. It means a short. It is only the individual persons. So it is not a body of associations where you find the partners. This particular partnership. So it is all individual who come there in their individual capacity. And the individual capacity, one more point to be noted here is, in case if any one of the member of the HUF wants to become a partner in a partnership firm, and the HUF, they've nominated a person. That person who is nominated, that member of HUF, in his individual capacity can become a partner. This is one point to be noted. Overall, HUF cannot become a partner. They cannot enter this agreement. But a nominated, one member can be nominated from HUF, any member from HUF, and he can enter into partnership, but only in his individual capacity. Remember it. So the next point, this particular HUF, whatever I told you that it can be entered in the individual capacity, this particular point was also upheld by the court, in which case in Rasik Lal and Company versus IT Commissioner. It said that an HUF directly or indirectly cannot become a partner of a firm, because the firm is an association of individuals. Association of individual. It means that whoever is coming to become a partner, he comes in his individual capacity. Clear? So a body of persons like a firm could not enter into partnership with other individuals. So body of firm, they are one particular firm cannot enter with individuals. The court said that even if a person is nominated by the HUF joined a partnership, the partnership would be between that nominated person and the partners of the firm. Only those two are related to each other. Clear with this? And so now we'll go for the next one. After HUF as a partner, and one more thing to be made clear is, under section 5 of Partnership Act, you find that a person can come and be a partner in his individual capacity and not from his status. So HUF, he cannot, if he's a member of a HUF, the HUF cannot become a partner, cannot enter into this partnership agreement. Only a nominated person can enter into this HUF. Only a nominated person from the Hindu undivided family can become a partner in his own individual capacity. Clear? Next, partnership firm as a partner. Now there is one more question. Can two partnership firms become partners? There is a partnership firm A, partnership firm B. Can both of them become partners? So it says that partnership can arise between persons. What did we study from the definition? Persons. So partnership can arise between the persons. Partnership firm is not capable of entering into partnership with another firm or individuals. So however, the partners of a firm enter into a partnership in their individual capacity with other individual. Any member of a partnership firm A can enter into the partnership with B. That is not prevented, but in his individual capacity. A member from a partner from a firm A can enter with B, but that person who is entering, he should enter from his individual capacity. That is what also is said in partnership firm as a partner. Remember, it is always an individual. Now coming to the most interesting part, company has a partner. Now, what under Companies Act, when you are studying Companies Act, you will get to know that it says that this is an artificial body of persons. Company. It's a legal entity with an artificial body of persons. So normally you can classify the persons into natural or artificial. So from that artificial company, where you can classify into natural and artificial, natural is anyhow a person can enter into his capacity. Artificial persons here also can become a partner. So here the company being an artificial person can enter into the agreement of this partnership and can also become a partner. So thus partnership can be formed between the number of companies. Clear with this? I'll give you a brief of this. Competent to contract, we are mainly talking about the minus. So he can get all the benefit and profit from the partnership, but he is not liable for any of the acts of the partnership firm. HUF as a partner, no, since they are body of persons, association of persons, no, they cannot become a partner. But any person can be nominated, who is nominated in HUF, that one member can become a partner, but he should enter in his individual capacity. Then partnership firm has a partner. Partnership firm through partnership cannot become a partner. It doesn't work also, because they are one partnership firm is engaged in one business and they are engaged in different business. It logically also does not become correct. If at all they are into same business, but there are certain terms and conditions in the agreement which may not be related to each other also. It is always, as per the definition, it is always the individuals who have to enter in their individual capacity. Now coming to the second essential of partnership. The second is there should be a business which has to be carried on. So carrying on the business. If at all there is no business transaction, they cannot simply enter into the partnership agreement. So there should be some sort of business which has been carried on, and that business should be lawful. If it is an unlawful business, it is not valid. It does not form a proper partnership firm. Then the most important point to be noted here is it should be a continuous process. It should not be that they've entered for one particular transaction and after the transaction is over, they're going to terminate this partnership. It should not happen that way. There should be continuous process. It should be one process. Even if it is for a fixed period of time, in case if they are entering, there should be certain transaction happening frequently. So that is one important point to be noted down. So carrying on the business, and it should be it's a continuous business. Now under this, you got to know that it should be a continuous business. So the main object for which this is formed is for carrying on the business. For sharing of profits. As I told you in the definition, what was the main object of carrying on this particular partnership is for sharing, to earn some profits and to share that profit among the partners equally or as per their interest. So this act, basically the act, it defines the business and includes every trade, occupation or profession. It says that include all the trade, occupation or profession. So though this definition is not exhaustive, it does not say what kind of business. It just says that trade, occupation or business. Though it is not exhaustive, still it is capable of including different kinds of commercial activities that is aimed at earning profits. So if at all there is profits, then yes, that particular profession or that particular job comes under this partnership. It can be, for instance, working as tailors. Different individuals come, they say that we'll be the partners and we'll be a tailors and we'll stitch some certain clothes. they'll have a boutique. So even that can be a partnership firm. Different individual coming, investing their money, and they become the partners. Even that can be happened. Engaging in legal professions. You have seen many legal firms, right? And rendering medical services. So if you go on, you will find many of the partnership firms. So it is clear that even though the act says that it includes only trade, occupation or profession, it is not exhaustive, but still it can include other kinds of commercial activities which earns profit. Clear from this? Now we'll go on to the next point. Purchasing goods for self-consumption. Purchasing goods for self-consumption. So, if the two persons enter into a contract, enter into an agreement of partnership, saying that we'll purchase certain goods for our consumption itself, does it becomes a valid partnership? To be very honest, if it is for a self-consumption, it is not a partnership. It is not at all a partnership. So, as I told you from the definition, carrying on the business, it should be a continuous process. There should be certain transaction taking place for earning profits. Clear with this? So, if for example, you can take for an example, if some persons come together and they tell other person, one person, you please buy the products in bulk, so it will be beneficial to us also. If you're buying it in bulk, maybe the prices are reduced and you may get certain discount. So you please buy it in the bulk, so we can take advantage of it, and we'll pay the price whatever you gave it to the seller. So they're coming together for buying something for self-consumption. Now, do you think this is a partnership? They are partners? No. So this example is same as in this case law, that is whom versus I. This I is a company. What happens? There was an agreement between this company, and 3 other persons, that this company has to go and purchase some oil and distribute the same between itself and the 3 other persons. And they agreed that we will pay you the price, whatever this company has purchased. So the purchase was made, who made it? Purchase was made by this oil company only. And while purchasing, he does not say that I am purchasing on behalf of other people also. There are 3 other people who want to purchase and I am purchasing for them also. He never gives a notice to the seller also. He purchases from his own account. And the seller does not know that yes, there are persons who are actually having an interest, concern in this particular product. The seller does not know. This company, oil company, later becomes bankrupt. And the seller of the oil, he sued the 3 persons for which the company has got the oil, right? He sued those 3 persons. Now, it was held in the court that the oil which was brought by this company has brought it in its own name. And the 3 persons who have actually entered into a contract that you please with the company, saying that you please buy the oil for us also in bulk. They have actually entered into a certain type of agreement that yes, you please buy it, I will pay the price. But this company, when buying with the seller, does not disclose that yes, there are other persons. He buys it from his own account. So it was held that this particular resale, whatever he is doing here, is not a partnership. And also, since this company had not mentioned the that he is purchasing for other three persons or on behalf of other three persons, there is no agency relationship also created. Therefore, those three persons on whose behalf this company had bought certain oil were not held liable. The first point was, since that oil was not meant for resale, it was for self-consumption, it was not for resale, and therefore there was no partnership also between them. And this company did not say that I am representing on behalf of the three others who are interested in buying oil. So no agency, no partnership. So the three persons were not held liable, and this company was held liable personally. Now after knowing this, about this case, now let's move on to another case. It's very interesting. There what happens, they buy certain cotton, 100 bales of cotton. For an example, they buy certain cotton jointly on a joint account, and thereafter they resell the same, and they share the profits equally. Whatever the profits they've got, or if they've incurred any loss, they're sharing it equally. So this particular business amounts to partnership. There is a partnership created between the parties. Here with the example, what happens if the goods are purchased for self-consumption? Now, we'll move on to the next point. Business should be lawful. As I said you in the earlier part itself, it should be lawful. Unlawful business are not valid. Yeah. The next point is, it has to be a continuous process. The most important thing to be noted under this is, it has to be a continuous process. That is, there should be a transaction. For example, we'll take an example. How continuous process? How do you validate by giving an example? You may ask this. So let's take an example. There are two persons, Ram and Shyam, who jointly purchase a house for 2 lakhs. Later on, they sell it. They sell it for 3 lakhs. Now, how much is the profit they got? It is 1 lakh. And they share it equally between them. Now, is it a partnership agreement? No. It was said that no, this does not become a partnership agreement since there is no continuous process. The transaction has to be carried on for a certain period of time. Clear? Now, the last part of this about the business to be carried on is particular partnership. Now, as we are discussing that it should be a continuous process, I said that in a previous example that it should not stop at one particular transaction. Now, what if it is a particular partnership? What is particular partnership? Section 8 of Indian Partnership Act gives the meaning of particular partnership. Particular partnership means it's an agreement between the partners whereby they engage in particular adventure or particular undertaking. That is, they do only one sort of business transaction. Now, as I said, it's a continuous process. There should be a series of transactions. Now, I'm saying that under particular partnership, that it is only a particular undertaking or particular adventure which they are doing. How is it? Even though it is a particular undertaking, they are taking only one sort of business. Still, in that business, there is series of transactions that takes place. For example, if partners who are working out at coal mine, if they go out for this coal mining, don't you think there's a series of business transactions that happens? That's a long process, right? Extracting coal and all. Otherwise, simple example, if there is a production of film, a movie. So is it a simple one? It has got certain other business transactions also, right? So that is called as a particular partnership. Though they are entering into one sort of business, still that business has got series of transactions. That is given under Section 8 of Partnership Act. So it means there is a continuous relationship, but it is a single undertaking with a continuous relationship, and there are series of transactions that takes place. We have a case law for this to understand in a better way. That is this case K. Jaggayya versus Kokumanu. What happens in this case is there is a plaintiff and there are two defendants who joined together and obtained a contract for the maintenance of a road. Plaintiff and two defendants, they obtained a contract for maintenance of road. There was some dispute, but when we are talking relevant to this partnership, it was held that yes, there was a partnership in road building activity. They had certain dispute relating to partnership, whether they were partners or what. So it was held in the court that yes, they are the partnership and it is relevant to this particular partnership. One business, that is maintenance of road. They are doing certain road building activity, but still it has got a series of transactions, right? So it was held, yes, they are partners and it comes under this particular partnership mentioned in the section 8 of Indian Partnership Act. With this sharing of profits. So as I said in the definition, what was the definition has the section for? It stated that partnership is a relation between the persons. It's a relation between the persons who have agreed to share the profits of a business transaction carried on by all or any one of them acting for all. This was the definition which we saw, and from that we derived essentials, right? So now the third essential is sharing of profit. From the very definition it was stated that yes, there should be sharing of profits. Now, what is the sharing of profits? Is it the main object? Is it necessary to share the profits? Yes, as per the definition of partnership, sharing of profits is the most important thing. So if they're carrying on a business and there is a profit sharing, then only it is called as partnership. You have certain clubs and societies which are not formed for the sake of profits. They cannot be termed as partnership. So those who are not interested in earning profits are not partnership firms. Only the firms which are making profits from the business transactions, they are partnership firms. Clear with this? So anyways, coming to Indian Partnership Act, nowhere it is defined what is the meaning of profit. They haven't said anywhere what exactly profit means. So anyways, it means a net gain, that is excess of returns over outlay. Whatever they have spent, if it is spent and whatever they've sold, if they receive in excess more than that, than whatever they have spent, then it is called as profits as per the layman's definition. So we come across many of the relating to the sharing of profits, there are many questions arise. Suppose the one question was, in case if there is sharing of profit going on, they are sharing the profits. With whomever you share the profit, can all they become partners? Can all the persons with whom a firm is sharing its profit, can they become partners of that firm? So there were many questions like this. And in case, second question was, in case there are getting a profit, a person is getting a profit from a partnership firm, can they be liable for the losses also? So these were the few questions which had come up. In the case law, there is a case law, famous case law, that is Grace versus Smith. It was stated by C.J. Grace that every man who has a share of profit of trade ought to also bear the share of loss. Whatever the question we had for the second one, that should the person who gets the profit should also share the loss, this question was answered in the case law Grace versus Smith. Well, we'll be studying this case law also further, but as of now, relating to share of profits, the judgment is very important for us. It was stated by C.J. Gray that Yes, every man who has a share of profit of trade ought to, that is, ought is must, very much. So ought also to bear the share of losses. They have to share the losses. Again, further in one more interesting case and also a very important case relevant to partnership, that is Cox versus Hickman. In this, the very basis of Section 6 was upheld. You can get to know what is the importance of Section 6 under this case law, and also it said that, well, we'll be going now in detail what it is. Before that, what it was stated relating to this sharing of profits is, they said that there should be a real relationship in order to establish that they are partners. Just like they are sharing the profits, no, you can't state that they are partners. So it seems a bit complicated, but yeah, the Section 6 has clearly given us who can be a partners, and also few instances who cannot be, even though they are sharing the profits, they cannot be a partners. So now let's move further. So I guess you got this, what is sharing of profit. So sharing of profit is mainly the objective of formation of partnership firm is only to share the profits. It is given in the definition itself. Okay, now coming to this Section 6, this Section 6 of Indian Partnership Act 1932 is a basis. It gives a caution. It's a kind of caution that presence of only some of the essentials of partnership. There are some essentials of partnership. Whatever we are studying, suppose the sharing of profit, that is there. That doesn't make, if they are sharing a profit with some other person, that other person cannot become a partner. You cannot say him as a partner. It is sort of caution. It is saying that no, there are persons, even though you are sharing a profit, they are not partners. Now, before knowing like who are partners and who are not partners, this is one of the important question also. Section 6, that is what we are discussing now, is the mode of determining the existence of partnership. It is more, you get to know. So this Section 6 is very important. So it is the modes of determining existence of partnership. That is, you get to know whether there is a partnership or not. So now, let's see what is this Section 6. Section 6 gives the real relation. It gives the real relation between the parties and all relevant to the facts that have been taken into account. For this section, you have two explanations given. The first explanation says that it makes the position further clear that sharing of profit between a certain person does not itself make such person partners. So the explanation one says that there is relationship between A and B. They are sharing certain profit. There are some essentials of partnership which you find. But no. Be aware, it is not that they should be having a relationship of partners. That is what your explanation 1 to section 6 gives. This is what is your explanation 1. Then after coming to explanation 2, your explanation 2 gives us the 4 instances. It says that it mentions the 4 instances where a person may be sharing profits. There are persons who may be sharing profits. They are sharing profits. Still, the real relation between the partners who are sharing profit is not of the partners. They need not be partners. They share profit, still they are not partners. What are those 4 instances? The question may come in your mind. The 4 instances are, the first is money lender sharing profits. So in case of money lender is sharing the profits of a firm, do you think he becomes a partner of the firm? We'll discuss. The second instance which is given is servant or agent who is sharing the profits. If a servant or an agent is sharing his profits, does he become a partner? We'll see. Third situation is a widow or child of a deceased partner. A widow. There's a person who is deceased. He is a partner of a firm. He is deceased now, and he has his legal representatives, has his wife. Can she become a partner? Can the child of the deceased man become a partner? Let's see how it is. And now, the fourth instance is the seller of goodwill. Goodwill. Remember, the seller of goodwill. If the person is selling his goodwill, can he become a partner? Now, all these instances you got to know under section 6. Now, let's go one by one and see whether they can become partners or not. The first instance under explanation 2 is money lender sharing profits. For this, you know who's a money lender, who's giving money as a loan, right? So, now we'll directly go to this case law so that it will be clear that whether the person who is lending money can become a partner of a firm. That is Cox versus Hickman. It's an 1860 case. So now let's know the facts of this case. The facts follows like this. There's a person, Smith and Son, and his sons. They carried on the business of iron merchant. They were iron merchants. Then after a few days they got into financial difficulties, as a result of which they executed a deed of agreement with the creditors. They executed certain deal. They made a deal with the creditors, saying that according to that arrangement, five representatives of creditors were appointed as the 5 trustees of his business firm. So there's a person, Smith and his sons. They were in financial difficulties. They were unable to repay whatever debt they have taken. So from their creditors, they ask the creditors to appoint 5 trustees for their business firm. Then what happens? The creditors of the Smith and Sons company, they say that okay, fine, we'll appoint 5 trustees, and they appoint 5 trustees, and one among them is the Cox and Wheatcraft. These two were important. So Cox is very important here. We'll get to know how they get involved in this case. Next, after some days, what happens? The 5 trustees are appointed. As per that agreement, I'm sorry, I forgot it. As per the agreement, what they have made is the net income was to distributed by the trustees amongst the general creditors, or that Smith and Son company. And after all the creditors were paid off, the business has to be handed over to the Smith and Company. This was the arrangement which they made with the 5 creditors who appointed 5 trustees. Then later what happens? Once a person called Hickman, this person comes there. He supplies certain goods to the firm, that is Smith and Company's firm. He supplies certain goods. One of the trustee accepts his bill of exchange drawn by this person Hickman, undertaking to pay the price of the goods. They say that okay, fine, we'll give you a bill of exchange and we'll assure your payment, we'll guarantee your payment to Hickman, who has delivered certain goods to the firm. Then later the money was not paid. Then Hickman sued Cox and Wheatcraft. These 2 persons who were the trustees of that firm, he sued them. He filed a case against them. For what? For recovery of price. Whatever the goods he has given, he supplied, for that recovery he has filed a case. Now this went to the court, and the court held that although the creditors were sharing the profits, and the business was managed by the trustees. Who were managing the business? That was trustees. And the trustees were giving the money to the creditors to clear off the debt of Smith and Company. Right? Clear? Still, the relationship between the Smith and Sons on one hand, and then on the other hand, including the creditors plus the trustees, was the relationship of debtor and creditor. The trustees and the relation of Smith and Company were like debtor and creditor. They used to take the money. It is like as if they were appointed like an agent. For your understanding, I'm just saying the creditors appointed them Cox and Wheatcraft has their agents to collect the money from whatever they get it from Smith and Company and to give it to them. It is for your understanding. Clear with this? So they were collecting the money and they were giving it to the creditor. So the relationship between them is of debtor and creditors. Therefore, the court held that the trustee, that is Cox and Wheatcraft, were not liable. Clear with this? Clear with this? So maybe from this you will be clear that money lender sharing profit, how it is related. Clear? If there is any, see, money lender in the sense, if the debtor, since Hickman was the creditor here and Cox was sued on the basis that he is a debtor, he has to give it. No. Still, this is not at all a partnership. He does not become a partner at all. For partner, there should be the essentials. Whatever the essentials are stated, whatever you get it from your definition, all those has to be there. Here, the relation between this Cox and Smith and Company was of debtor and creditor. Please do remember this case. This is a very important case. And the next case, for your better understanding, is Mellow March and Company versus Court of Wards. Now, in this case, its case is quite simple and also interesting. The facts goes like this. There was a Hindu Raja who advanced sum of money to a firm. He gave certain money to a firm. Then the Raja was given, the firm gave him certain powers, certain powers in order to repay his amount. What they did is, they gave Raja the extensive powers. They gave him a powers over the control of the business, so that that Hindu Raja could control the business, and he was to get a commission on the profits under the repayment. For the repayment, whatever the amount he had to repay, he used to get the commission for also from the profit, whatever the firm earned, plus 12% interest. So what are the things he got? He got the power to control the firm. First one. Second one was, he got certain commissions on the on the profits of the firm for the repayment of his loan amount. Third one was 12% interest. So these are the things which this Raja had got, Hindu Raja had got. So then it was held that, then we are talking about this relevant to partnership. Then the question was whether there is any partnership existing between that Hindu Raja and the firm. It was held that in the agreement to create a partnership, it was not an agreement to create a partnership. Do you find it was an agreement to create a partnership? No. No partnership can exist here, because the firm was giving all the share in profit. It was a security to Raja, who had lent money for the firm. They have lent certain money, so they are giving their profits. So it was held that no, the creditor and debtor, whatever the relationship exists, they cannot be called as partners of the firm, even though they are sharing the profits. Clear? Now we'll move on to the next one. From these two cases only, you can say that you can establish that money lender sharing the profit, they are not partners. Clear? Next one is servant or agent sharing profits. Sometimes a share in the profit is given to an agent or a servant to increase his interest in the business, to encourage him to motivate him to perform better, right? So they give it from their profits, or he may have a fixed salary, or he may be getting a commission. Sometimes out of the profits also they do give some money. Now from the profits they are sharing some amount with the servant or agent. Now do you think they become partners of the firm? For that, there were these two cases which helped to understand that they were not the partners of the firms, even though the servant or an agent is sharing the profit with whom? The partnership firm. The first case law is McLaren versus I am sorry if my pronunciation is wrong, Veracholi. It is Verchoyle. So what happens in this case is, the facts are very simple. It is said that there is an assistant of a firm of brokers, and that assistant was paid certain share from the profits over and above his salary. He was getting his salary, but still from the profits he was getting certain amount. He was getting certain share. And at times also he signed certain documents, he authorized certain documents on behalf of the firm. Now the question was, since he is authorizing, he's got a power to authorize also, and the person that is the person who's working in the firm, he's also getting certain profits. That is one of the essential of partnership. Does he become a partner? So it was held that such a servant only acted as an agent. There is a principle of the concept of principal and agents was created. Since he is working on behalf of the company, he is authorized to sign the documents, and also share of profit is given to, for increasing the interest in the work or to motivate them. So even though he is getting certain share from his profit, he cannot be termed as a partner of a firm. The relationship of agency is established here, that is principal and agent. Clear with this? And the next one is Munshi Abdullah Latif versus Gopishwara. What happens in this case is, it's a very simple case. Here you can clearly get to know how the agent and principal relation is established. So there's a person here who had undertaken to load and unload railway wagon for a limited company. There was a limited company, we'll consider it as ABC Limited Company, and this person A had undertaken a job of loading and unloading the railway wagon, loading the goods and unloading the goods. And this person A was appointed by B, and this person B was paid 75% of the profits for this job. As well as he was told that in case if there is any loss, if you don't do your work properly, you will also be liable for the losses. There was an agreement between B and the other party, and B appointed A for that work. Now there was some and when again coming to this pertaining to partnership relation, there was a case for this, and it was held that the relationship between A and B is of, you might have understood already, it is a relation of agent and principal. They do not become partners. There is no partnership at all. Clear with? So, and the modes of determining the existence of partnership, that is given under section 6 of Partnership Act 1932. The third, under explanation 2, the category of persons who do not become partner even though they are sharing profits are the widow or the child of a deceased sharing profits. In case of this widow, that is a person, a partner, he is no more, he has passed away, and the widow gets some benefit, she gets some profits from the firm, or the child of a deceased get some profits. They are just getting the profits. They are not doing any work. They are not participating in any activities related to the management of the firm. They are just getting profits. Can they be partners? Because they are getting some profits, they are not participating in anything. We'll see what is the case in this. So it is said that as per this section 6, it is given that widows and the child of a deceased may get some profits in share as per the agreement. If there is any agreement that yes, the deceased person's legal representatives has to get some share in the profit of the firm, yes, they will be getting. But such persons, they never become, or they do not become, it is not never, you can say they do not become partners, but still they can upon an agreement become an partner. Let's see how it is. First, before that, we'll take this case law, Holney versus Hammond. In this case, the facts goes like this. There are 5 persons who decide to do a business, common business, and therefore they enter into a partnership agreement. The firm is formed, everything is done, and also in agreement they enter it for certain duration, and the duration is 7 years. The duration is up to them, the partners. Sometimes it may be for a period of just for some period, that is for certain particular activity they are entering, and as soon as that activity gets over, then they are discharged, they are no more the partners. We have learned this in section 8 of Partnership Act, that is particular partnership. Anyways, keep those aside, that was just for your revision. So these 5 persons, they enter into partnership for the period of 7 years. In duration they are fixed, and they also agree saying that if in case of the death of any partner, their legal representatives, that the deceased executors, can get a share in the profit, and the partnership firm can continue its business as usual, even though if a person is no more, he has passed away. So thereby one person passes away, and the executors who did not actually take it, those executors of the person who has passed away, they did not take part in the management at all. Still, as per the agreement, they got 1/5 of share of profits. Now this plaintiff, maybe there must be some loss. So this plaintiff, now he says that, see, you're getting the profits of 1/5, whatever profits we are earning, you're getting it. As per the agreement we entered, it was agreed that that the partners will share equally the profit and losses as well. Since they are getting profits, the deceased person's wife and children are getting the profits, now you also become liable for the losses. Now this particular case went to the court. The court said that the executors, though they are sharing the profit, they have not become partners. They don't know what is happening in the company itself. I mean the firm, sorry. They don't know what is happening in the firm itself. They are not taking part in the activities, nor they have told that you please carry on this business. In case if you incur any loss, I'll bear it. No, they have not made such agreements. Only the agreement was made among the partners. They will share it equally, both losses and profits also. And in case of death of a person, that certain profits has to be paid to the deceased family. Now this plaintiff, he goes and files a case. It was held that no, though they were sharing the profits, they were not partners. Clear with this case law? And also one more point to be noted, that there is no restriction or a bar for representatives who are the representatives of the deceased person to enter into partnership, if at all. But what is necessary is they should have an agreement stating that the deceased person's family, I mean the representatives or executors, are entering into the contract, and thereby they become equally liable for the profits and losses. If at all they make an agreement like that after the death of the deceased person, or initially only they make an agreement as such, then even the deceased person's executors or the legal representatives can become a part of partnership firm. Clear with this? Anyways, you're clear with this case. In this, the family was not held as a partners, because still, in spite of sharing the profits. Clear? Next is seller of goodwill, sharing the profits. This is also a very important point. Seller of goodwill. Goodwill in a sense the capital. It's simple, right? The capital. They're giving the entire business to a firm. So do they, and they get certain share in the profits. Whatever the firm is earning, they give certain share to the person who is selling the goodwill. Now does he become a partner? Is the question. He is selling it. Seller and buyer relation is different. Partner relation is different. Let's see. So it is said that the person who is selling his goodwill may be entitled for the share of profits on consideration for the sale of his goodwill, but such person cannot become a partner merely that he is sharing the profit of such firm. For that, we have a wonderful case, that is Pratt versus Strick. In this case, there is a doctor who sold his goodwill of medical practice. His business, whatever he was, maybe he's having a hospital or he's running some clinic, he has sold his business. And he entered into the agreement with the buyer to whom he is selling his goodwill, that he would help them, that is help the buyer by introducing the patients for 3 months. He said that for 3 months, don't worry, whomever patients I get, I will introduce you to your business, to your firm which you have taken over. Since you have taken over my medical business, I will introduce them to you. And for that, the buyer of the goodwill said that, okay fine, since you are helping us for 3 months, you would be entitled to the half of the share whatever we get, and also in case if we incur loss, you have to incur it. They put this condition and both of them agree. Now the question before the court was, does this doctor become a partner? Since he is sharing both losses and profits equally, does he become a partner? No. The relationship is only different. He is a seller of the goodwill and there is a buyer of the goodwill by a firm. So never they can become a partner, though he is getting a share in profits, and also he is taking the liability of losses also. So he is not a partner. Here with the instances, the 4 instances which were given under explanation 6, the 4 instances was, the first one was the money lender, second one was agent and servant, the third one was widow or child of a deceased, and seller of goodwill. All these persons, if you closely look at them, are getting certain profits from the firm. Still, they are not partners. They have not entered into a relationship of partnership. The last essential is mutual agency. After knowing the previous, what was the third essential? That is sharing of profits. After that, it is mutual agency. So, in the definition part that was given under section 4, we came across one phrase: business carried on by all, or any one of them acting for all. This was the phrase which we came across. What do you mean by this? From this, you will get to know that the law of partnership is undoubtedly a branch of law of principal and agency. So I'll better explain it to you by giving some examples. What is the business carried on by all? First thing, we'll break it and there are 4 partners in a firm, and all of them are working together. That is business carried on by all. The next part says that any of them acting for all. So there are again 4 partners in a firm, and 3 partners, partner A, B and C, authorize D. They give certain powers to D, saying that, see, we won't be able to come. You please take care of all the things in the firm. They give him the powers, they delegate him with the powers. What is that? Basically, giving the powers and delegating the powers is nothing but agency. What did you study in agency? The previous chapter, it is relationship between the 2 persons, that is the principal and the agent. This principal is authorizing the agent to do certain work. He delegates certain work. He gives him powers. Right? In the same way also, here also they are giving powers. This is then one of the essential of partnership. There, in case if the partners are not able to come to the firm, they can authorize a person. They can make one of the partner as an authorizing authority. They can make him saying that you please do this work on behalf of us. That is one of the beautiful essential of this partnership firms. Clear with this? So it is based on the law principle of agency. It is based on the principle of agency. So this particular thing, that mutual agency under partnership, is founded on this principle only, that is agency principal. Clear? Again we come back to the most important case, that is Cox versus Hickman. Under this case, it was assumed that this person Cox was an agent, Cox and Wheatcraft were the agents, and on the basis of that the case was filed. But the court held that no, there are no agency relationship as such. The trustees were merely the agents of Smith and Sons company, but they were not the principals. Who were not the principals? Smith and Son company were not the principals. And there was no mutual agency. This person, trustees who were appointed, were giving, who appointed them? It was the creditors, 5 creditors who appointed them, right? So, there is no relation of agency at all. Under mutual agency, when you are writing this, you have to mention this case law and also give the judgment that though it seemed to appear like an agent relationship, they were acting as an agent, there was no agency relationship. Do you think any features of agency were there? No, it was not found, and therefore no agency. Clear with this? Next, after completing all the essentials of the partnership, now we'll move on to certain important points before proceeding to the next topic. The first important point is not separate, the partnership firm not a separate legal entity. This partnership firm is not a separate legal entity. Now, what do you mean? Why it is not a separate legal entity? It has got partners who are working for some business. There are sections laid down in Partnership Act, but why do you still say it is not a legal entity? So, says that no, they are not a legal entity, and basically the persons who have entered into this partnership are individually called partners, right? So, and collectively all the partners together they form a firm. And the name under which their business is carried on is called as firm's name. Right? This is what is told in your Partnership Act under Section 4. So, but in the eyes of law, a firm is merely a collective of individuals. There is a collection of individuals. All individuals have come and they are making some business. Who have entered into that business is called partnership. And partnership cannot be a legal entity. Partnership is in contrast with that of a company. Company has got a legal status. It is an artificial person. It is an artificial juristic person. Whereas partnership is not, which has a legal personality distinct from its members. The members are separate and the firm is a separate one. But in company, the members of the company, that is the directors, they are representing the company. So, but under the eyes of law, it is not separate legal entity. Clear with this? Again, there is one contrasting thing here. When you see this firm's personality for tax purpose, I told you now that they are not a separate legal entity. But when you see for the tax purpose, don't you collect the tax considering it is as some profit is from profit is gained? That is why don't the tax authorities collect tax from them? When they are taxable, they have to be a legal entity. Under Section 231 of Income Tax Act, you find under this is basically definition of Income Tax Act. It gives who are the persons who are taxable, who can be taxed. There are other persons also. Along with this, the firm is also coming under the persons who can be taxed, who are liable to be taxable. So there are 6 others also along with this. That is, you have certain 6 heads under which the person who can be taxed can you will get to know easily. Under that, the most important and relevant to our topic, the firm is also taxable. So when it is not a legal entity, why do you tax it? But under Income Tax Act, the court has held that it is very interesting that for taxing purpose, they become a legal entity. You can tax them, and it comes under your section 231 of Income Tax Act. Clear? So, in the IT Act, that is the Income Tax Act, unlike Partnership Act, a firm is a separate and distinct legal entity. That is a separate unit for assessment. Now we'll go to this case, IT Commissioner versus GP Naidu and Son. This case is very interesting. So this GP Naidu and Sons, he has got 3 sons. They enter into, they create a partnership firm on 1st of October 1968, and it is constituted by them, and the firm ownership is also with them, and the firm name is Messrs. GP Naidu and Son, and this firm was created for dealing with pulses. Again, after 1 month, that is on 26 November 1968, another partnership, they have another firm with same number of persons, is 3 sons and GP Naidu plus GP Naidu. They make another firm, that is on 26 November 1968, and that is in the name of Messrs. Sri Lakshmi Oil and Flows Mills, for the purpose of erecting oil, some oil business. So they have got 2 firms created in the year 1968 itself. In the next year, that is for the year 1971 and 1972 assessment year, that is they have to pay the income tax for the previous year. When they are paying the tax, they give the whatever the incomes they have got, they submit it to the tax authorities. This tax authorities, what they do is, they club the income. On what basis they club? They say that since the constitution of this partnership is same, that is GP Naidu and his 3 sons are there, and the ownership is also same, that is why we have clubbed it. Now there is a contention by SSC saying that no, how can you club this? There is no intermixing or interlacing between the 2 firms, and hence the profit which is earned by 2 different firms are totally different incomes. One income is from pulses, another from some oil works. And whatever the contention took by this SSC, that is GP Naidu, the income tax appellate tribunal held it is right. Yes, whatever he says was right. Then this goes on an appeal, this case goes on an appeal. And there, the court agreed on the view taken by the income tax appellate tribunal, stating that yes, under income tax, for the purpose of assessment under section 231 of Income Tax Act, which defines who is a person, and it defines a firm as a legal juristic person. For the purpose of assessment, why this person you get to know, why do you have to study as a person? Definition is to get to know who is an assessee, and for recovering whatever the income tax, plus to know what is the income tax on that person, whatever they have incurred it. So it's a person within this meaning, and for that purpose, the 2 firms have to be treated as 2 different entities for the purpose of assessment. I think you are clear with this. How we are the most important point to be noted in this case is the decision given by the High Court. It was clearly said that it is a legal entity. Though first we said no, but for the sake of Income Tax Act only. Under section 231, when you just go refer this, you find a definition of person. Under that, you have a point called firm, where a firm is considered to be a person and he is liable for the income taxes, and as well as for recovery if anything due from the assessee. Assessee is a person who is paying the income tax.